high above the rugged cliffs of the Rocky Mountains, where the winds whispered secrets to the ancient pines and the rivers carved their own stories into the earth, there was a legend of an eagle known as Torin. He was not just any eagle, he was one of the great ones. His feathers shimmered with the brightness of the sun, and his wings, when spread wide, could cast a shadow that made the very earth tremble beneath him. Torin had been the king of these skies, reigning over the vast expanse of forest, river, and rocky peaks. His sharp eyes saw farther than any other, and his talons could catch a fish from a river so swift it was impossible to follow with the human eye. He soared alone, a solitary figure against the blue, the wind his companion, the sky his kingdom. But the mountain was a place of both beauty and danger, and even a king could not escape its fury. It was a crisp autumn day when disaster struck. Torin had been hunting at the highest peak, where the air was thin and the winds howled fiercely between jagged rocks. As he dove toward a flock of mountain sheep, his powerful wings slicing through the air, something unexpected happened. A gust of wind, more violent than any he'd ever encountered, caught him off guard. His feathers, strong as they were, could not withstand the force, and in a heartbeat, he was knocked off course. His right wing struck the side of a cliff, the impact so sharp and sudden that Torin felt his body snap with the force of it. The world spun. The once familiar sky became a blur as his wing failed him. He plummeted, twisting through the air, unable to regain control, his sharp talons grazing the rocks as he fell. Finally, the earth welcomed him with an unforgiving embrace. Torin's body crashed against the forest floor with a thud, and for a long moment, everything was still. When he regained consciousness, the pain was unbearable. His right wing, once so strong, now hung limply by his side, the feathers bent at unnatural angles. His head spun, and his vision blurred. He tried to move, to rise, but his body refused to obey him. He could hear the soft rustling of the forest around him, the call of a raven in the distance, the hum of the wind. But he could also hear his own breathing, ragged and shallow, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. The majestic bird that had once ruled the sky was now helpless, grounded, vulnerable. For a moment, Torin wondered if this was the end of his story, if his wings had finally betrayed him, if the mountain had claimed him as its own. But the fierce will to survive burned deep within him. He had survived storms, predators, and countless dangers before. This, too, he could survive. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest. The night was coming, and Torin, broken and unable to move, knew that he would not make it through alone. His only hope lay in the hands of those who lived beneath the mountain, the ones who had learned to protect and heal the creatures of the wild. This was how Torin, the mighty eagle, came to be found by the very people who would give him a second chance at life. But the journey of his recovery would not be easy. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with moments of doubt and pain, but also hope and resilience. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson, a small team of wildlife rescuers arrived at the base of the mountain, drawn to the injured bird's call. The journey to the Wildlife Rescue Center was long, and Torin's suffering was evident. Each jolt of the stretcher as they carried him through the dense forest seemed to echo the pain that racked his body. His right wing, the powerful appendage that had once allowed him to soar through the heavens, was now an impossible weight. He could feel it hanging at an odd angle, limp and useless, but he was still conscious, still fighting, even as his vision flickered between wakefulness and unconsciousness. The team that had found him, a group of dedicated wildlife rescuers, moved with urgency but gentle care. They had encountered many animals over the years: bears with broken paws, foxes caught in traps, hawks with wings clipped by storm winds. But none had been as majestic and as troubled as this eagle. They knew that if they didn't act quickly, Torin's chances of survival would slim by the hour. They transported him to the Wildlife Rescue Center, a small sanctuary nestled on the outskirts of a forested valley, surrounded by towering pines and the quiet hum of a world untouched by time. The center was run by Dr. Lila Hayes, a woman who had dedicated her life to healing the animals that nature and man had broken. Her hands had mended the wings of falcons, her care had soothed the bodies of countless creatures, and her heart was as vast as the mountains themselves. When Dr. Hayes saw Torin, her first reaction was one of awe. Eagles were rare, their spirits untamed, and to encounter one up close, especially one so injured, was a humbling experience. She knelt beside the eagle, examining his broken wing with practiced eyes. She could feel the weight of his gaze, his amber eyes sharp and full of defiance, as if to say, "I am not finished. I'll do everything I can," she whispered softly, her fingers brushing lightly over his feathers. It was a promise. The first step was stabilizing him. The team worked quickly, administering fluids and pain relief. They carefully splinted his wing, securing it in a way that would allow the bone to heal while minimizing further damage. Torin was a fighter, but even the strongest of fighters needed help when they were at their most vulnerable. In the days that followed, Dr. Hayes and her team worked tirelessly to help Torin recover. He was fed special meals designed to rebuild his strength, but every movement he made seemed to remind him of his fragility. His spirit, once so unyielding, had dimmed slightly. He was frustrated, unable to move as he had before, and angry at the helplessness that now defined him. But as the days passed, he began to trust those who cared for him. They were gentle, understanding the delicate balance between healing and preserving the wild heart of the eagle. Dr. Hayes often sat with him in silence, watching him with a mix of admiration and empathy. She could see the fire in his eyes, the desire to return to the skies, but she also knew that it would take time. Eagles, she knew, were not meant to be caged, even temporarily. And yet, Torin's recovery was slow, painfully slow. The healing of his wing took longer than anyone had anticipated, and there were moments when both Torin and his caretakers feared he might never fly again. But hope was a powerful thing, and with each passing week, the eagle grew stronger. His appetite increased. His muscles, once stiff from disuse, began to stretch and tighten again. His wing, though still fragile, began to show signs of improvement. The bond between Dr. Hayes and Torin deepened, and despite his wounds, Torin began to show a glimmer of gratitude. He would eat from her hand, accept the comfort of her presence, and in moments of stillness, he would close his eyes, allowing himself to rest, a rare gift for a creature as proud as he. Yet, Torin's heart remained restless. Even as his body healed, the longing for the skies never left him. Each day, as he looked out the small window of his enclosure, he would stare at the vast horizon, as if daring the world to let him return to it. The mountain had not claimed him. Not yet. Days turned into weeks, and soon the time came for the next stage of his recovery, flight therapy. It was a delicate process, one that would require patience from both the eagle and Dr. Hayes. But it was the only way to know if Torin could truly return to the skies. One early morning, when the first light of dawn painted the world in shades of rose and amber, Dr. Hayes stood in the field with Torin. The center's large flight enclosure was ready, a massive structure with high netting and plenty of space for the eagle to stretch his wings. Torin stood at the edge of the enclosure, his eyes wide, his wings fluttering nervously at his sides. For a moment, it was as though time stood still. Then, with a deep breath, Torin took his first tentative step into the enclosure. The world was his once again. Dr. Hayes stood at the entrance, watching, holding her breath. She knew this was a pivotal moment. Torin looked at her one last time, his eyes filled with a deep, unspoken gratitude. Then, with a powerful thrust, he flapped his wings, and something extraordinary happened. For the first time in weeks, Torin soared. The wind lifted him, and his wings, though still tender, caught the air with a grace that left the rescuers in awe. It wasn't perfect. His flight was a bit wobbly, his right wing still weaker than the left, but he was flying. He was free. And for that moment, Torin knew that he was not finished. He was not just a bird of the earth, but a creature of the skies. But would his journey end here? Would he truly be able to return to his former glory, to reclaim the heavens that had once been his kingdom? Only time would tell. It was a week after Torin's first flight that the real test would come, one that would determine whether the eagle could truly reclaim his place among the heavens. Dr. Hayes and her team had been watching him closely, tracking his progress every day. They had seen the way his strength returned, how his confidence in the air grew with each flight. But despite all the progress, there was still a lingering question. Was he ready to leave the sanctuary and return to his wild life? Torin's powerful amber eyes had begun to show the unmistakable signs of longing. Each time he soared through the flight enclosure, the world outside seemed to beckon to him. He would hover near the netting at the top, peering out into the vast wilderness beyond, his keen gaze scanning the distant peaks as if he could already sense the mountain where he had once ruled. But the wilderness was no place for a wounded eagle. The risks were too high. The world out there, so beautiful, so untamed, could be unforgiving, especially for one still recovering from injury. Dr. Hayes watched him one morning as he took his first long flight of the day, the sun rising behind the distant cliffs. He soared higher and higher, pushing himself to test the limits of his wings, the air rushing past him like a forgotten memory. He was magnificent, his wings cutting through the sky like a knife through the clouds. For the first time since his injury, he looked truly whole. Yet, as he reached the highest point of the flight enclosure, Torin suddenly faltered. His right wing, though healed, was not as strong as it once had been. The strain of the ascent caught up with him, and his flight became shaky. He dipped and swerved, his body twisting as though remembering the pain from those first days on the ground. For a moment, it seemed as though he might fall again. Dr. Hayes's heart skipped a beat. She had seen this before, the fear, the hesitation, the uncertainty. She knew that Torin wasn't just battling physical weakness, but the emotional scars of his fall from grace. Even the fiercest of eagles could doubt themselves after such a traumatic experience. But then something remarkable happened. Torin steadied himself. His wings beat slower, more deliberately. He adjusted his angle, finding his balance in a way that was almost graceful, a reminder of the eagle he had once been. He was not perfect, but in that moment, he was something even more important, he was determined. With a final, powerful stroke of his wings, he glided smoothly back down to the ground. He landed with a soft thud, his talons gripping the earth as if grounding himself in that fleeting moment of triumph. He stood still, his head held high, his chest rising and falling in steady breaths. Dr. Hayes approached him slowly, her heart full of quiet pride. She had watched him heal, but now, she realized, she had witnessed something even greater. Torin had reclaimed his confidence. And in doing so, he had reclaimed his spirit. She knelt beside him, reaching out to touch his feathers gently. "You, ready," she whispered. For a while, Torin stood there, as if contemplating her words, his piercing gaze never leaving her face. Then, after a moment, he stepped forward, as if to acknowledge her with a brief nod. He spread his wings once more, and the moment stretched out, thick with the weight of what was about to come. It was time. Dr. Hayes opened the gate to the flight enclosure, the outside world waiting just beyond. Torin stood at the threshold for a moment, his wings fluttering in the cool breeze. He could feel the wind calling to him, the familiar, comforting rush of air that had once been his playground. He could almost taste the freedom that awaited him, a freedom that had seemed so far away just weeks before. And then, with one final, majestic leap, Torin took flight. The sky welcomed him as though it had never doubted him, the clouds parting to reveal the vast expanse of the mountains he had once known so well. He soared higher and higher, his wings now strong, steady, and sure. The earth below seemed to grow distant, shrinking beneath him as he ascended. His flight was no longer awkward or uncertain. It was powerful. It was the flight of a king returning to his kingdom. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Torin was truly free. As he flew over the mountains, his body following the familiar contours of the land, he felt a profound sense of peace settle in his chest. The wind whispered through his feathers, and the sky stretched endlessly before him, as boundless as his spirit. There was no hesitation now, no fear. His wings were whole again. But even as he soared through the heavens, Torin knew something deep inside, this was just the beginning. The world would challenge him again. The storms would return. The wilds of the mountains would test him, just as they always had. But now, Torin understood that the journey wasn't just about how high you could fly, or how far you could soar. It was about how you rose after falling, how you found the strength to keep going after the worst had happened. Torin flew on, a majestic silhouette against the setting sun. The world was his again. The sky was his. And as he disappeared into the horizon, a faint cry echoed through the mountains, a cry of victory, of survival, of freedom.